The stopwatch hit the gymnasium floor before I even registered that Talia's hand had moved. It bounced once, cracked once, and skidded under the bleachers, where I would spend the next 4 minutes on my knees while 300 people watched me crawl. "You're actually crying over a broken clock," Talia said, loud enough for the pep rally to hear her over the pep band. "God, Ren, it's a stopwatch. Buy a new one." It wasn't a stopwatch. It was the only thing my father had left with his handwriting still on it, my initials scratched into the casing the year I turned 9, and Talia Voss knew exactly what it was, because I had told her, in the dark, in the kind of voice you only use once with a person you trust completely. She had kept that voice in her pocket for 11 months. Now she spent it on a laugh in front of Bryn Ashford, whose hand was already laced through hers, whose smile had the practiced warmth of a girl who has never once been afraid a room would turn on her. "We're better as friends," Talia added, like a woman reading the fine print on a contract she'd already broken. Bryn's fingers tightened around hers. The gym smelled like popcorn and floor wax, and underneath it, like my own fear souring sweet. I found the stopwatch under the bleachers with a hairline crack across its face, the second hand still twitching, refusing to stop even now. I closed my fist around it and did not look up. Before this story goes any further, if you want to see where a girl like that ends up when someone finally chooses her on purpose, subscribe to the channel now, because it does not stay this way for long. My name is Ren Calloway. I was 20 years old, an Omega, a sophomore at Marrow University, and until that Friday I had been mostly invisible, which had always felt safer than the alternative. I kept stats for the women's basketball team unofficially, which meant I sat 2 rows behind the real bench with a battered spiral notebook and charted things no one asked me to chart, who cut left under pressure, who flinched at contact, where the floor opened up for exactly 1.5 seconds if you knew to look. My father had taught me to watch the space between plays instead of the ball itself. He'd been a coach for 22 years in a town small enough that everyone came to his funeral. I'd been charting games since I was 7 years old, sitting beside him on a hard bench with a legal pad, and I had never once stopped, not even after his heart gave out at halftime 3 years ago and I had to finish scoring the book myself, because somebody had to. Nobody at Marrow knew that. They knew me as Talia's ex then, as of 4 minutes ago, as the girl Talia's ex had performed for in front of the entire junior class. I gathered my cracked stopwatch and my dignity, in that order, because the dignity took longer to find, and I was still on my knees under the bleachers when a shadow fell over the gap in the risers, and a voice like a closed door said, "You're bleeding." I looked at my palm. A thin line of red crossed it, where the stopwatch's broken glass had bitten in. I hadn't felt it. "It's fine," I said. "It isn't." The voice belonged to Sloane Kerrigan, team captain, the girl the whole athletic department called the wall behind her back, and never once to her face, and she was crouched at the edge of the bleachers looking at me with an expression I would spend the next several months learning to read. She smelled like black spruce and rain on iron, cold and clean, and entirely unbothered by the pep rally roaring 20 feet away. "Come out from under there." "I'm fine," I said again, which was becoming a lie with practice. "I didn't ask if you were fine." She held out one hand, palm up, steady. "I asked you to come out." I took it. Her grip was careful in a way that surprised me, like she'd measured exactly how much pressure a stranger's hand could survive and stayed a full degree under it. When I stood, the gap between us was barely a foot, and the noise of the gym seemed to drop half a register, the way a room does right before a whistle blows. "That's a bad crack," Sloane said, nodding at the stopwatch still clenched in my bleeding hand. "Old model. Somebody's father's, probably, judging by how you're holding it like it might still be breathing." I didn't answer. I couldn't. 3 years of grief does not enjoy being correctly diagnosed by a stranger in under 10 seconds. Coach's office, now, she said, and it wasn't a request, though somehow it also wasn't cruel, an alpha's command dressed as concern, the kind I would later learn was the only way Sloane Kerrigan knew how to be gentle. You're getting that hand looked at, and then you're going to tell me why a girl who bleeds silently under bleachers is sitting 2 rows behind my bench every single game with a notebook nobody assigned her. I hadn't realized anyone had noticed the notebook. I hadn't realized anyone had noticed me at all. Part of me. The part still kneeling in spirit, even after I'd stood up, wanted to tell her it was nothing, a hobby, leftover grief dressed as a hobby. But there was something in the set of her jaw that made lying feel like an insult I didn't want to pay her, so instead I said the truest thing I had. I watch where the floor opens up, I said. Your team leaves it open on the weak side every 3rd possession. Your point guard telegraphs the pass with her shoulders 2 full seconds before she throws it. Sloane went very still. Behind her, the pep band hit a bad note and slid off it. Say that again, she said. Somewhere Coach Reyes can hear you. That was how I ended up in the athletic building 40 minutes later, with a bandaged palm and a captain who had not let go of my elbow the entire walk over, as if she thought I might disappear back under the bleachers the second she looked away. Coach Reyes had run the Marrow women's program for 11 years and had the specific exhaustion of a woman who had heard every excuse a losing team could invent. She listened to Sloane explain, arms crossed, jaw set the way it got before a technical foul. And then she looked at me like I was a rumor she was deciding whether to believe. Show me, she said, and slid a legal pad across the desk. Last night's game against Castellan Tech. Second half. Go, I picked up the pen. My hand still stung under the bandage, but my father's handwriting rose up in my memory like a hand at my back, and I started to write. I filled 4 pages in 11 minutes. I charted the weak side gap, the telegraphed passes, the exact possession count where Castellan's defense sagged because their center's ankle brace was 2 seasons old and she was protecting it without knowing she was protecting it. When I finished, Coach Reyes read the pages twice in silence, and Sloane read them over her shoulder without asking permission, close enough that I could feel the low. Steady warmth radiating off her like a held breath. Where did you learn to see the game like this? Coach Reyes finally asked, and it wasn't really a question. It was an accusation with better manners. My father, I said. He coached for 22 years. I used to sit next to him. Used to. He died 3 years ago. Courtside, halftime of a game we were winning. I said it flat, the way you say things you've said enough times that the words have worn smooth. I finished scoring the book that night because somebody had to. The office went quiet enough that I could hear the ventilation system click on. Sloane's gaze hadn't moved off me since I'd set the pen down, and when I finally looked at her, the ice I'd heard so much about wasn't in her eyes at all. Something else was, something that looked almost like recognition, like she'd found a language she hadn't known anyone else spoke. I want her on the bench for every game, Sloane said to Coach Reyes, not to me, though her words were clearly meant for both of us. Officially, with a badge, with a seat that isn't 2 rows back. She's not on scholarship, Kerrigan. She's not staff. Then make her staff. Sloane's voice didn't rise. It didn't need to. It had the particular flatness of a decision already made, the kind other people simply had to catch up to. We're 4 games from the conference tournament, and I just watched a girl diagnose Castellan Tech's entire second half off memory. I'm not walking away from that because of a form. Coach Reyes looked at me for a long moment, then sighed the sigh of a woman who had learned, over 11 years, exactly when to stop arguing with her captain. Be here Monday. 4 o'clock. Film room. She pointed her pen at me like a verdict. Don't make me regret this. I promised her I wouldn't, and I meant it with the particular desperation of someone who has just been handed the first door in 3 years that didn't look like it was closing. Sloane walked me out into the parking lot afterward, though there was no obvious reason for her to. The athletic building empty and blue in the last of the daylight. She stopped by my car, hands in her jacket pockets, watching me fumble one-handed with my keys. You should get that stopwatch fixed, she said. There's a place downtown. Voss doesn't get to be the last thing that touches it. I looked up, startled that she'd said the name out loud, that she'd clearly clocked the entire humiliation from wherever she'd been standing before the bleachers. You saw that. I saw all of it. Something moved through her jaw, controlled, deliberate, the way I'd learned she controlled everything. I don't like watching people get discarded in public. I like it less when the person being discarded turns out to be the smartest mind in the gymnasium. She held my gaze one beat longer than comfortable, then stepped back, putting distance between us like she'd caught herself leaning too far into something. Monday, 4 o'clock. Monday, I agreed. She was 3 steps toward her own car when she stopped and turned back. Ren, she said, my name new in her mouth, careful, like she was testing whether it would hold weight. For what it's worth, she lost the only person in that gym who was actually watching the game instead of the scoreboard. Then she was gone, taillights sliding out of the lot, and I stood there holding a cracked stopwatch that had somehow, in the space of one terrible afternoon, become the least broken thing about me. The film room at 4 o'clock on Monday smelled like burnt coffee and dry erase marker, and I was 7 minutes early, which in retrospect should have told me how much this had already started to matter. Sloane was already there, feet up on the table, watching game tape with the sound off, and she didn't look up when I came in, only said, sit, and slid a second remote across the table like she'd been expecting me to want one. The team, over the next 2 weeks, sorted itself into 2 camps with the efficiency of a jury that had already decided the verdict before the trial began. Priya Nandi, the vice captain, watched me with the flat hostility of someone protecting a captain she considered hers to protect, arms crossed through every film session, correcting my terminology twice in the first hour like she was hoping I'd embarrass myself out the door. Deja Okafor, on the other hand, dropped into the seat beside me on day 3 with a bag of pretzels and the directness of a woman who had decided within one glance that I was worth knowing. You're the stopwatch girl, Deja said. Priya's furious Sloane likes you more than the offense she's run for 2 years. It's very funny. Ignore her. She'll come around. She always does. Sloane doesn't like me, I said. She likes that I'm useful. Deja gave me a look that suggested she found this either very sad or very stupid, possibly both. Sure, she said. That's why she's memorized your coffee order. I hadn't told Sloane my coffee order. I found out 3 days later that she had, in fact, memorized it. Chai, extra honey, 2 bags steeped too long. Because on the night before our first tournament game, when film session ran past 10 and my stomach had been growling audibly for an hour, she set a paper cup down in front of me without comment and went back to breaking down Castellan Tech's zone defense like she hadn't just walked. 11 minutes to the only shop still open. You didn't have to do that, I said. I know, Sloane said, not looking up from the whiteboard. You hadn't eaten since noon. I could hear it. You could hear my stomach. I hear a lot of things, she said, and there was something in the way she said it, low and even, that made the back of my neck go warm, despite the chill still clinging to her jacket from outside. The team's facility, I learned quickly, ran on 2 tiers. There was the public locker room, cinderblock and fluorescent, where the walk-ons and the practice squad changed. And there was the captain's lounge past a keycard door. Leather couches and an espresso machine nobody but Sloane seemed to know how to use properly. A whole different climate behind one locked door. The first time she walked me through it, badge clipped to my shirt now, official. I felt Priya's stare on my back, like a hand pressed flat between my shoulder blades. "She'll ease up," Sloane said, once the door had shut behind us. "Priya doesn't trust new things near me. It's not about you. It's a little about me. It's about the fact that I don't let people in here," Sloane said, gesturing at the room, at the couches, at the framed photograph on the far wall of a young woman in a Marrow jersey, mid-jump shot, frozen forever 3 feet off the hardwood. "And I let you in on day 9. I looked at the photograph longer than I meant to. The woman in it had Sloane's exact jaw, softened by a smile Sloane didn't wear. Not once, not yet, not for me." "Who is she?" Something closed in Sloane's face, quick and total, like a shutter falling. "My sister," she said. "Later, not today." I didn't push. I had learned, watching my own grief calcify into a stopwatch I couldn't bear to replace, that some doors need to be opened from the inside. That night, walking me to my car through a parking lot gone silver with early frost, Sloane stopped under the one working light and looked at me for a long moment before she spoke. I meant what I said. About watching the game instead of the scoreboard. Her breath fogged between us. "Nobody's watched anything about me in a long time, Ren. Not really. I wanted you to know I noticed you noticing. I didn't have an answer for that, not one that wouldn't have given away more than I was ready to. So I said the only true thing available to me. I noticed," I said. "I notice everything. It's sort of my whole personality." Something in her face almost broke into a smile, almost, the corner of her mouth lifting a fraction before she caught it and pulled it back under control, like a woman rationing something precious. "Get some sleep," she said. "Tournament starts Thursday. I need your eyes sharp." I drove home that night with the heater blasting and my chest doing something warm and unfamiliar, and it took me until I was almost at my apartment to realize what it was. I had, for the first time in 3 years, stopped bracing for the next humiliation. It didn't last. Thursday's game went the way the film had promised it would. Castellantec's zone collapsing exactly where I'd charted it would collapse. Sloane finding the gap on a crossover so clean the home crowd came up out of their seats. We won by 14. I watched from the bench in my new badge, notebook open, and for 2.5 hours, I forgot Talia Voss existed at all. Friday morning, I remembered. Coach Reyes called me into her office before the sun was fully up, and I knew from the set of her shoulders before she said a single word that something had gone wrong. Priya was already there, arms crossed, not meeting my eyes, and on the desk between us sat a printout of a text conversation I had never sent, formatted to look exactly like my number, offering to trade Marrow's playbook to a rival program for $200. "This came in last night," Coach Reyes said, "from an anonymous tip. I need you to tell me this isn't real." "It isn't." My voice came out steadier than I felt. "I've never spoken to anyone at Castellantec in my life. The number matches your contact card." Then someone spoofed it. "Coach, I would never." "I know what you'd say," Coach Reyes said, not unkindly, but with the particular weariness of a woman who had to protect a program regardless of what she personally believed. "I have to bench you pending review. I'm sorry. It's policy." I looked at Sloane, who had come in halfway through, still in yesterday's warm-up jacket, and for the first time since the bleachers. Her face gave me nothing at all. Not coldness, exactly, something worse. Uncertainty, the narrow, controlled blankness of a woman who did not know, in that moment, whether the person she'd let into the locked room deserved to be there. "Sloane," I said. "I need to think," she said, which was not a no, but it wasn't the yes I'd been braced to hear either, and it landed in my chest like a door swinging shut on a draft. They took my badge at the end of that meeting. I sat in the parking lot afterward with my hands shaking too hard to fit the key in the ignition, and I did not cry. Because I had learned a long time ago that crying in that particular lot never once made anything better. The team bus left for the semifinal in Holloway 3 days later, and I was on it only because Coach Reyes, against Priya's audible objection, had decided a review wasn't a conviction, and a stats analyst mid-season was hard to replace on principle alone. I sat near the back with my notebook closed on my lap, watching the frost-white fields slide past the window, feeling every eye that flicked toward me, and away again like static. The storm came out of nowhere, the way storms in that part of the state always claim to, though the forecast had shown it 2 days out if anyone had bothered to look. By 6 o'clock, the highway had gone the color of a television with no signal, snow horizontal in the headlights, and the driver pulled the bus into the lot of a roadside motel outside a town with a single blinking light, announcing over his shoulder that nobody was making it to Holloway tonight. The motel had 11 rooms and a basketball team of 14-plus staff. Coach Reyes did the math out loud, swearing under her breath, and started doubling people up with the efficiency of a woman who had run out of options an hour ago. I ended up standing in the parking lot with my duffel bag and no assignment at all, snow collecting on my shoulders, until Sloane appeared out of the swirling white like she'd been summoned. "You're with me," she said. "Room 6, only one left with 2 beds. You don't have to. I know I don't have to," she said, already walking, already expecting me to follow, and something in the certainty of it made arguing feel like wasted breath. Room 6 had a heater that clanked like it was working through personal grievances and 2 beds separated by a nightstand with a lamp that flickered every time the wind hit the window. Sloane sat on the edge of her bed, elbows on her knees, staring at the wall for a long time before she spoke. "I pulled the metadata," she said, "on the text. While you were on the bus, I went very still. And the message was sent from a burner number registered 2 days after the pep rally." Her jaw tightened, the muscle there working like it was chewing through something bitter. "Registered under a name that traces back, through 3 shell accounts, to Bryn Ashford's phone plan." The heater clanked. Outside, the wind threw a fistful of snow against the glass, hard enough to rattle it. "You believed it," I said, quieter than I meant to. "For 3 days. You believed I would do that." "No," the word came out fast, almost sharp, and Sloane looked up at me with something raw moving under the careful surface she wore like armor. "I believed I couldn't afford to be wrong twice in one season, and I hated myself for it every single hour I let that fear win." "That's different from believing it. I should have said that Friday. I didn't have the words yet. You have them now? I'm working on it." A ghost of a smile, gone as fast as it arrived. I'm better with a whiteboard than a conversation, in case you hadn't noticed. I sat down on the edge of my own bed, close enough now that our knees nearly touched, and the room went quiet except for the heater and the wind and the sound of both of us breathing carefully, like the air itself might crack if handled wrong. "Why didn't you defend me louder?" I asked, in Reyes's office. "You just went quiet." Sloane was silent long enough that I thought she wouldn't answer at all, because the last time I trusted someone completely and defended them loudly in front of everyone who mattered, she said finally, "I watched it destroy her anyway." I told myself if I ever loved someone again, I'd protect them by staying quiet. Staying controlled. I thought quiet was armor. Her eyes found mine, and the ice I'd first met under the bleachers wasn't anywhere in them now. It isn't. I think I finally understand that. It's just another way of leaving. The lamp flickered once more and steadied. I could smell her from here, spruce and rain on iron, closer now than it had ever been, and underneath it something warmer than I expected, something that smelled almost like relief. "Sloane," I said. "Don't," she said, but it wasn't a warning. It was closer to a plea, her hand coming up to rest, feather light, along my jaw. "Tell me to stop, and I will. I mean that. Every part of it. Don't stop," I said, and the space between us finally closed. The kiss lasted exactly as long as the wind allowed before someone pounded on the door demanding blankets, and we broke apart laughing into each other's shoulders, breathless, the first real laugh either of us had let loose in days. Sloane pressed her forehead to mine before she stood to answer the door, and against my skin she said, so quietly it was almost lost under the storm, "I see you. Wren Calloway. I've always seen you. I just didn't know how to say it out loud until tonight." The days after the storm were the softest I had lived since my father died. We were snowed into that motel 2 full nights, and somewhere in the second one, over a hot plate Coach Reyes had commandeered from the front desk, and a can of chili neither of us had planned on, Sloane told me about Rhea. "She was captain before me," Sloane said, stirring the pot with a plastic spoon that kept threatening to melt. 3 years older. Better than me at everything, and I mean everything. Our father made sure we both knew it. He'd coached her since she was 6. Told her weakness loses games. Told her a captain who cries in front of her team isn't a captain, she's a liability. Sloane's voice stayed level, the way I'd learn it always did when she talked about the things that hurt the most, control as its own kind of grief. She never once let anyone see her struggle. Not us, not her teammates, not the counselor our mother finally begged her to see her senior year. She smiled in every photograph right up until the week she stopped smiling for good. I reached for her hand across the narrow space between the bed and the hot plate. She let me take it. "I inherited the doctrine," Sloane said, "not the captaincy. The doctrine came first. Control equals survival. I thought if I never let anyone close enough to see the cracks, I'd never end up like her. Turns out all it did was make sure nobody ever got close enough to catch me if I did." "I'm not going anywhere," I said. "I know that now." She turned her hand over, laced her fingers through mine, thumb tracing slow, unhurried circles across my knuckles. "Your turn. Tell me about the stopwatch." So I told her. About my father, 22 years of small-town coaching, the legal pad on the bench beside me every Friday night of my childhood, the exact sound his voice made when he said, "Watch the space nobody else is watching." "Wren, that's where the whole game actually lives." I told her about the ambulance, about finishing the scorebook with my hands shaking so badly the numbers came out crooked, about carrying the stopwatch every day since like it was the only proof he'd existed at all. "He'd have liked you," I said. "He liked people who paid attention." "Then I have something in common with him," Sloane said, "because I don't think I've paid real attention to anything in years until you sat under those bleachers with blood on your hand and wouldn't let go of a broken clock." She kissed me again that night, slower than the first time, unhurried, both of us learning the shape of something neither of us had let ourselves want out loud. When my phone lit up near midnight, chilly long gone cold, I almost ignored it. I shouldn't have. "Have you seen it?" Deja's text said. "Check the athletics forum." Now, I checked. The video had 11,000 views already, a grainy clip time stamped from 3 days ago, edited to show me alone in the film room after hours with a rival coach's number pulled up on my screen, though anyone who actually watched the full unedited footage would have seen I was simply returning a call about my father's old assistant coaching position back home. Someone had cut the footage down to 9 seconds and captioned it Marrow's new stats girl selling secrets to Castellantech, same one Kerrigan's been sneaking around with. The warmth of the room went cold around me in an instant. By the time we made it back to campus 2 days later, the video had 40,000 views and a screenshot of it was taped, with deliberate cruelty, to my dorm room door. Coach Reyes met us at the gym with her mouth already a thin, furious line, and the athletic director standing beside her told me, in the gentlest voice a man delivering terrible news can manage, that I was suspended from all team activities pending a full misconduct investigation, effective immediately. "This is fabricated," Sloan said, "low and dangerous, a register I hadn't heard from her before. I've seen the raw footage. Someone spliced it." "I understand you're close to Miss Calloway," the director said, "which is exactly why I need you to step back and let the review process work." Sloane's jaw worked once, twice. I watched her, the captain, the wall, the girl who'd once told me quiet was armor, visibly decide, in real time, whether to fight this in the open or retreat behind the same control that had cost her everything before. I watched the mask come back up, slow and total, the same shuddering I'd seen the day she wouldn't talk about her sister's photograph. "Understood," Sloan said, and something in me went hollow at how easily the word came out of her. She didn't call that night. I told myself she was strategizing, building a case, doing the quiet, controlled thing that had always been her armor. By the third silent day, I stopped telling myself that and started packing away the parts of myself that had let her in, brick by brick, the same way I'd braced myself back under the bleachers with Talia's laughter ringing overhead. I sat on my dorm room floor on the 4th night with my father's stopwatch in my lap, the crack still running clean across its face, and for the first time since I'd found it under the bleachers, I let myself think about putting it away in a drawer and never picking it up again. That was the worst image of the whole terrible week. Not the video, not the suspension, not even Talia's name trending on the forum thread again, like a wound reopening on schedule. It was me, alone on a cold floor, holding the last piece of my father and wondering if wanting to be seen had ever been anything but a mistake. I did not stay on that floor. That was the difference, I think, between the girl who'd knelt under the bleachers in October and the one who stood up on the 5th night with red eyes and a plan. My father hadn't taught me to watch the space between plays so I could feel sorry for myself in it. He'd taught me to watch it so I could use it. I pulled every camera angle Marrow's athletic department had archived from that night in the film room, cross-referenced them against the server timestamps the leaked clip claimed, and found what I'd suspected within an hour. The edited video's metadata had been altered twice, and the second alteration had been made from a device registered to the same shell account that had spoofed my number. 3 weeks earlier, Bryn Ashford's account, and buried in a group chat log Deja managed to screenshot from a mutual friend who'd finally had enough of the whole thing. There it was in Talia's own words, timestamped the night of the storm. "She's getting too close to Kerrigan. We need something bigger before the semifinal. Cut the film room clip. Nobody'll check the timestamp." I laid it all out on Deja's kitchen table at 2 a.m, hands steady now in a way they hadn't been in days, and Deja looked at the printouts, then at me, and said, "You built a whole forensic file by yourself in one night." "I told you," I said. "It's sort of my whole personality." I called Sloan at 6 a.m. She picked up on the first ring, like she hadn't slept either, like she'd been waiting by the phone the entire silent, hollow week. "I have proof," I said. "All of it." "Talia, Bryn, the shell account, the group chat. I need you to help me get it in front of the review board before the championship, not after." There was a pause, and then Sloane's voice came through low and fierce, stripped of every ounce of armor I'd watched her put back on 4 days earlier. "I never should have gone quiet," she said. "I told you control isn't armor, and then the first real threat that showed up, I did exactly what I swore I'd stop doing." "I am so sorry, Ren. I was trying to protect the process, and I let you sit alone with the worst of it instead. I know why you did it. That doesn't make it right." I heard movement on her end. Keys, a door. "I'm coming to you." And then, we're burning this thing down together. In the open, where everyone who watched them humiliate you gets to watch them lose. She showed up at my dorm 19 minutes later, hair still damp, eyes rimmed with the particular exhaustion of someone who has spent 4 nights failing to sleep through their own regret. She didn't say anything when I opened the door. She just pulled me into her, both arms, careful the way she'd been careful with my bleeding hand the very first day, and held on like she was making up for every hour of silence at once. "Tell me to stop, and I will." She murmured against my hair, an old promise repeated, and I laughed, wet and surprised, because we weren't even doing anything yet, and she was still asking. "I'm not telling you to stop," I said. "I'm telling you to help me finish this." We took the file to Coach Reyes and the athletic director together that morning, laid it out exactly as I'd built it, and watched 2 faces go through disbelief, then fury, then the particular grim satisfaction of officials who finally have paperwork instead of gossip to act on. The review board moved fast once real evidence existed. By that afternoon, Talia Voss and Bryn Ashford were both summoned for a conduct hearing scheduled the same week as the championship game, and my suspension was lifted before dinner. Sloane wanted more. I could see it in the set of her shoulders walking out of that office, the old doctrine flaring back up bright and hot, make them pay for it completely, make sure they never recover. Control the outcome so thoroughly nothing like this ever touches you again. "Sloane," I said, catching her wrist in the parking lot before she could disappear into another furious phone call to the director. "Let the process work. Don't become the thing your father tried to make you. I don't need them destroyed. I need them exposed. There's a difference, and it matters to me that you know it." She stood very still, breathing hard, and then something in her shoulders came down, an inch, then more. "You're right," she said. "I got so far into wanting to protect you, I almost forgot what you'd actually asked for." She pressed her forehead to mine, the same gesture as the motel room, steadier now. "Truth, not blood." "Truth," I agreed. "Let's go win a championship." The gymnasium was full past capacity for the championship game, every seat and half the standing room besides, and somewhere in section 12 I could see Talia and Bryn sitting stiff and silent, summoned by their own conduct hearing scheduled for the following morning, forced to watch the season they'd tried to burn down play out anyway. I was back on the bench in my badge, notebook open, chai in hand because Sloane had of course remembered. And when Castellon Tech's defense collapsed exactly where I'd charted it would collapse in the 4th quarter, I stood up without thinking and called the play across the gap to Coach Reyes myself, weak side, now they're sagging off the post, and watched Marrow run it to perfection. Sloane splitting the defense on a drive so clean, the crowd came out of their seats screaming. At the final buzzer, with the scoreboard reading Marrow by 6, Sloane didn't run to her teammates first. She ran to the bench, to me, lifted me clean off my feet in front of every camera in that gymnasium, every parent, every student who had once watched Talia laugh at me under the bleachers, and set me down only long enough to say, loud enough for the front rows to hear every word, "This is the girl who called the winning play of the season. This is the girl I choose. In front of all of you, so nobody ever gets to say it quietly again. The gym went up in noise. Somewhere in section 12, Talia's face had gone the particular gray of someone watching a story end in the exact opposite direction they'd engineered it to. The conduct hearing the next morning confirmed everything the file already proved. Talia Voss lost her spot on the university's ambassador program and her sponsorship deal within the week, both institutions citing conduct unbecoming once the fabricated evidence went public. Bryn Ashford was removed from the dance team's captaincy and, when the group chat logs made their way to the wider student body regardless of anyone's intention, found herself with considerably fewer friends than the popularity she'd traded me for had ever seemed worth. That night, under the bleachers where this had all started, Sloane found me packing up my notebook, and for the second time in that exact spot, she crouched down to my level. "I want to do this properly," she said, "not because the season demands it. Because I do." Her hand found mine, steady, sure, Ren Calloway. "Will you be mine? All of it, the bond, the bite, everything that means. Tell me to stop, and I will, at any point, for any reason, and I'll still choose you tomorrow." "I'm not telling you to stop," I said for the second time that week, and meant it more than I had ever meant anything. She kissed me first, slow, deliberate, and when she drew back her hand rose to my collar, asking without words, and I answered by tilting my head, bearing the curve of my throat, an invitation older than either of us. "Ask me," I said, "with your words. I want to hear it." "May I," Sloane said, low against my skin, "claim you, here, now, in the place where I first saw you?" "Yes," I said. "Please," the bite, when it came, was gentle and certain, a bright, clean pain that bloomed instantly into something warmer, a snap through my whole chest like a held breath finally released, and I felt her feelings rush into the space beside my own for the first time. Relief, terror, and underneath both of those, a joy so total it startled us both into laughter against each other's shoulders. 6 months later, the gymnasium wore banners for a conference title instead of gossip about a rumor. I stood at center court in a dress, the color of the stopwatch's brass casing, newly repaired, ticking steady on my wrist, while Sloane waited for me at the free throw line in front of the whole team. Coach Reyes, Deja grinning through happy tears, and Priya, who had come around exactly as Deja predicted, and who had personally organized the entire ceremony down to the last folding chair. "In 15 years of coaching," Coach Reyes said, officiating with the gruff sincerity of a woman who had watched this entire story unfold from the sidelines, "I have never once seen Sloane Kerrigan wait for anyone. She's waiting for you right now like the whole world could end and she wouldn't move an inch." Our vows were short. Sloane promised to never again mistake silence for protection. I promised to keep watching the space nobody else thought to watch, and to always tell her when I found something worth seeing there. When she slid the ring onto my hand, my father's stopwatch caught the gymnasium lights and threw one small, steady gleam across the hardwood, right at center court, right where it all began. A year on, we adopted a scruffy shelter dog neither of us had planned for, and named him Whistle, because Sloane said the house needed one more thing that made noise when something important was about to happen. Priya still corrects my terminology in film sessions out of pure habit, though now she does it while borrowing my chai. Deja married her longtime girlfriend that spring, and I stood beside her exactly the way she'd stood beside me. Talia and Bryn, I heard through the campus grapevine, transferred to different schools entirely, in different states, having discovered that a story built on cruelty rarely survives contact with the truth. I still keep a notebook. I still sit 2 rows from the bench some nights, though now I have a badge that says my name instead of just a stopwatch that says my father's. Sloane still walks past every single time to press one kiss to the crown of my head before tip-off, an old habit turned permanent promise, and every single time she says the same 4 words against my hair. I see you always. There is a particular kind of grief that convinces you invisibility is safety, that being overlooked is at least a wound you control. It isn't. It's only a wound you've learned to carry quietly. Somewhere out there is always a person willing to notice the space nobody else thought to watch, and when she finds you, the whole gymnasium will know it before you do. The end. If Ren's story found something in you, the years of being overlooked, the moment someone finally chose you loudly instead of quietly, that feeling is exactly why this channel exists. And subscribing helps make sure more stories like hers keep finding their way to you. I'd love to know, what's the one small thing someone remembered about you that made you realize they actually saw you? Drop it in the comments. I read every one. Thank you for staying through Ren and Sloane's whole season with me. Come back soon. The next story is already waiting on the bench, notebook open, ready to call the play.